Hi, you're watching us on NewsX and NewsX YouTube. My name is Devika Chopra. I have with me the managing editor of NewsX, Rishabh Gulati, and we'll be shedding some light into a very important study that has now come our way, Rishabh. Scientists have now studied a particular genome that has been found. If you could just firstly tell our viewers, what is it that we've been able to establish in regards to the Indus Valley civilization?
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. This was a paper that's been published a couple of days ago by an Indian professor from the Deccan University, Deccan College within Pune, and David Reich, who has been compiling a DNA history of the subcontinent and regions around here in Harvard University. Now, the reason this is huge is that they basically found a 5,000-year-old skeleton of a woman who lived around 2800 BC in Rakhagiri, which is of course a Harappan site. And the reason the location of this skeleton was also interesting is that it's a Harappan site that is located on the paleological remains of the Saraswati River and not really the Indus River. So both the location of the site, 5,000-year-old skeleton, and from one of the bones of the skeleton, an inner ear bone, after doing years and years of genetic analysis, they finally managed to pull out some cognizable DNA. So they had 100 samples of skeletons from the Harappan Valley civilization, Indus civilization, Saraswati civilization, and none of those samples had ever yielded usable DNA simply because they were so old and degraded. But for the first time, they have managed to pull out the DNA. Now, this is huge. It is huge to the point that I can't imagine why this isn't the biggest story in India. It should be, and which is why we here on NewsX are taking it up. Because what the DNA analysis has found, Devika, is that the DNA coding, the DNA map is unique to the Indian subcontinent. That this woman, her DNA history was completely unique to the Indian subcontinent. It wasn't parts of DNA from Mesopotamia, it wasn't parts of DNA from Central Asia. It wasn't parts of DNA coming in from Mongolia. This was a uniquely Indian DNA that was a unique strand to India at the time this woman died.
Okay, so Rishabh, if we can also then go into some previous theories, if you can shed some light into that and why this particular discovery busts then all of those previous theories of where we come from and where our genetic pool is actually built on.
Our understanding has been educated mostly by Western historians and Western archaeologists, British archaeologists, people like Francis Mortimer, who came up with this Aryan invasion theory of the British archaeologists, and Indian historians, for want of having any better information, have followed this. So what did we learn as children? We learned as children that there was this Indus Valley civilization, some Aryan invasion took place, and then this Indus Valley civilization that had the great cities of Harappa and the Mohenjo-daro, which you can touch, feel, look and see, with the great Indus Valley script, the Harappan script, which today till date remains undeciphered, that these people were removed by the Aryans, and the people who live in India are descendants of the same band of people that also went to Europe. So if you heard of the word Caucasian, the reason that the Americans and the British are called Caucasians, the word Caucasian comes from the Caucasus, the mountains which are around Georgia in Central Asia, is that there was this Indo-German, Indo-European Aryan race which came, part of them came to India and part of them of course went to Europe. Now the reason this was a very convenient deal for Western historians was that you could paint India as not having an ethnic civilization, that all of the civilization actually came from the West. And then therefore you could justify all the Western invasions that took place of India, whether it be coming from the Mughals. Who were the Mughals? The Mughals were Mongols, claimed descendants from Kublai Khan. Who came from the Central Asian steppes, the same place the Aryans are supposed to have come from. Then of course you go further west, which is the Portuguese, the Spaniards, the French, and then finally the British. It very conveniently fit that narrative of theirs that India has always been invaded, its great civilization, its history, its people all came from the West, and actually nothing actually existed here in India. Now what this DNA actually shows is that not only was there an individual ancestry of Indians, the first ever Indians who did not come from the West, they were unique to India, but in fact from India migrated to the West. So of the DNA samples, 11 matching samples have been found in Iran. Now, Iran, Iraq is Mesopotamia, right? Babylon and the cradle of civilization, that is often being called. So then it corrects the myth that the cradle of civilization was probably most emphatically from India. And the 11 people whose DNA matches with this woman's DNA, which has been found in Rakagiri, indicates that they were Indians who had migrated there, because their DNA does not match with other people of the same time who were in Iran or living in Iraq, which is what it is completely redefining, Devika, how Indian history and where India comes from rests.
Absolutely. And Rishabh, if you could also just quickly get into the specifics, two specific findings. So not just the fact that the unique Indian ancestry then went to the west, but also the fact that the whole of South Asia could possibly have the same ancestry coming from the Indus Valley civilization, and also the fact, since you touched upon Mesopotamia being the cradle of civilization, they've also the study has also found that perhaps farming, which was a technique that we thought we had inherited from the West, could have in fact been invented in the Indus Valley civilization.
So the
and then spread
assumption was always that, look, it is that Indians learned how to do farming and learned how to build cities by these, with contracts with these people who came in from the West, whether they came from the steppes, whether they're Caucasians, or whether they were Mesopotamian Iranians. Now what we are learning is, from this DNA, if you just juxtapose this DNA, what this tells us is that India's Stone Age civilization, the hunter-gatherer humans of about 12,000 years ago, evolved to become farmers and city builders very much within India. It wasn't skill sets that they learned from anywhere in the West. And this also busts this very, very huge deal in the Indian subcontinent, which has also been imposed on us, that North Indians by default were different from South Indians, that they were Aryans living in the north, or Aryan descent people living in the north, and the Dravidians living in the south. So it opens the box of analysis on re-understanding these myths also that were taught to us by Western historians, that look, the Dravidian were different people, the Aryans living in the north and the descendants were different people. If indeed it is true, and this is what the DNA evidence now suggests, that there were ethnic Indians living in India who from the Stone Age, from hunter-gatherers, then learned how to farm, became farmers, then built the cities, and these was all ethnic to India, all indigenous to the Indic region around this Saraswati river, which is where the large sites have actually been found, that actually this entire gamut of understanding of our history changes. And it is so important, Devika, that each and every one of us, 1.3 billion Indians living here, the 40 million persons of Indian origin, and the larger Indian diaspora all over the world, start appreciating and understanding this, which is why this needs to be put slap bang in the middle of India's agenda. This study needs to be taken further, because there's so much that has come out in evidence in just the past few weeks and months that we've showcased here on NewsX that most in the larger mainstream has been ignored, Devika.
Absolutely, Rishabh, and of course, thank you for watching this video. This was us just explaining to you. This is just the beginning of, as Rishabh was mentioning, what really needs to be on India's agenda. Thank you for watching. You were watching us on NewsX YouTube.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.